The heavy linen napkin felt rough against Vanessa's fingertips. The only grounding texture in a world that suddenly felt made of glass and judgment. She smoothed the fabric over her lap for the 10th time, trying to pull it lower, trying to cover the way her thighs spread against the velvet seat of the booth. The burgundy dress she wore, a garment Jessica had practically forced onto her, felt like a second skin that was slowly tightening. It was a beautiful color, deep and rich like old wine, but the cut was unforgiving. It clung to the curve of her hips and the soft swell of her stomach, leaving nothing to the imagination. Vanessa took a sip of water, her hand trembling slightly. She checked the antique clock on the wall of Le Magnifique. 20 minutes past 8. He was late. Or more likely, he wasn't coming at all. Why had she agreed to this? Desperation, she reminded herself. Pure, unadulterated desperation. The Sweet Haven Bakery, the legacy her grandmother had left her, was drowning in red ink. The ovens needed repairs. The rent had hiked up by 15%, and the suppliers were demanding payments she simply didn't have. When Jessica had called, practically breathless with excitement about a business associate of her husband, who was looking for a companion and was known to be generous, Vanessa had hesitated. But then the final notice from the bank had arrived in the morning mail, printed on that stark, terrifying pink paper. Just dinner, Ness, Jessica had promised. He's serious, old-fashioned. He just needs a date for some events. You're pretty, you're smart, and you need a break. A break. Vanessa looked around the restaurant. It was the kind of place where the silence was heavy, broken only by the clinking of silver against china and the hushed whispers of people who had never worried about an overdraft fee in their lives. The chandeliers overhead cast a warm, golden glow that should have been flattering, but to Vanessa, it felt like a spotlight examining her flaws. She felt too big for the delicate chair, too loud in her burgundy dress, too poor for the air she was breathing. She looked at the empty chair opposite her. It mocked her. It was a testament to her foolishness. Men like the one Jessica described, wealthy, powerful, connected, didn't show up for women like Vanessa Collins. They wanted stick-thin models who picked at salads, not a 26-year-old baker who smelled like vanilla and yeast and carried the weight of her stress on her hips. "Is the gentleman joining you soon, madame?" the waiter asked. He had appeared silently, his face a mask of polite boredom. I'm sure he'll be here shortly," Vanessa lied, her voice sounding thin to her own ears. "Traffic, probably." The waiter gave a curt nod, his gaze flickering over her dress with a microscopic hint of disdain, before he turned and glided away. Vanessa felt her face heat up. She wanted to leave. She wanted to run back to the safety of her kitchen, put on her flour-dusted apron, and knead dough until her arms ached and her mind went quiet. Then she saw him. Not her date. Him. Brandon. Her stomach dropped. A physical sensation of nausea that had nothing to do with hunger. He was standing near the host stand, arguing with the maitre d'. He looked terrible. His jacket was ill-fitting and shiny at the elbows, his hair a mess of grease, and even from across the room, Vanessa could imagine the smell of stale cigarette smoke and cheap beer that clung to him. He shouldn't be here. Brandon couldn't afford a glass of water in a place like this, let alone a meal. He was supposed to be in Atlantic City, or so he had claimed the last time he called to beg for money she didn't have. Vanessa tried to shrink into the booth, praying the dim lighting would hide her. She turned her head, pretending to study the wine list, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Please don't see me. Please just leave. But luck had abandoned Vanessa a long time ago. Well, look at this, a voice sneered, close and grating. Vanessa froze. She looked up slowly. Brandon was standing right there, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn trousers, a smirk twisting his thin lips. He looked older than his 28 years, worn down by bad choices and spite. "Hello, Brandon," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands beneath the table. "What are you doing here?" "Business," he said vaguely, his eyes darting around the room before landing back on her. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that drew glances from the nearby tables. "But the real question is, what are you doing here, Nessie? Did you win the lottery? Or are you washing dishes in the back? I'm waiting for someone." she said, lifting her chin. She refused to let him see how small he made her feel. She refused to let him know that the mere sight of him brought back memories of shouting matches, broken plates, and the constant eroding criticism that had taken her years to rebuild from. Brandon looked at the empty chair opposite her. He scoffed, looking at the untouched setting, the full water glass, the bread basket that Vanessa hadn't dared to touch. Waiting, huh? He pulled the chair out. The legs scraped loudly against the parquet floor, a harsh sound that made Vanessa wince. He sat down, sprawling his legs out as if he owned the place. Let me guess. He didn't show. He's running late, Vanessa insisted, though her conviction was crumbling. Brandon reached into the bread basket and tore off a chunk of artisan sourdough. He shoved it into his mouth, chewing with his mouth open, crumbs falling onto the pristine white tablecloth. Face it, Nessie. He took one look at you through the window and kept driving. Who's gonna want to be seen with a whale like you in a place like this? The insult landed with the precision of a practiced blow. Vanessa felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, hot and humiliating. She gripped her napkin tighter, her knuckles turning white. Leave, Brandon, she whispered. Please, just leave. I'm doing you a favor, he said through a mouthful of bread. I'm sitting here so you don't look like such a loser. You should be thanking me. Maybe you can buy me a drink. I know you've got cash in that register at the bakery. I saw the line last week. That money is for the rent, she hissed. Get out. Or what? Brandon leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, invading her space. His eyes were bloodshot, manic. You gonna call the waiter? Tell him your ex-husband is bothering you? I'll make a scene, Vanessa. I'll scream so loud everyone in this fancy dump will know exactly how pathetic you are. He stood you up, fatty. Is that what they're all thinking? Vanessa looked down at her lap, defeated. The shame was a heavy blanket, suffocating her. He was right. Everyone was looking. Everyone was judging. The burgundy dress felt like a costume on a clown. She started to reach for her purse, thinking that if she just gave him $20, maybe he would go away. Maybe she could salvage a scrap of dignity and run out the back door. She didn't see the shadow that fell over the table. She didn't notice the way the air seemed to grow colder, sharper, charged with a sudden, terrifying electricity. She only realized something had changed when Brandon stopped chewing. Brandon's eyes, which had been full of malice a second ago, suddenly widened. His gaze fixed on something behind Vanessa, or rather someone standing directly behind him. The color drained from his face so fast it was as if someone had pulled a plug. His mouth hung open, a half-chewed piece of bread visible on his tongue. Vanessa frowned, confused by his sudden paralysis. Then a hand appeared. It was a large hand, pale and strong, with long fingers that looked like they could play a piano or snap a neck with equal ease. The hand landed on Brandon's shoulder. It didn't strike him. It just rested there, but the weight of it seemed to crush Brandon into the seat. You seem comfortable, a voice said. It was a baritone, deep and smooth like dark chocolate, but laced with a menace so potent it made the fine hairs on Vanessa's arms stand up. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that carried a death sentence. Brandon started to tremble. Visibly tremble. The water glass on the table shook in sympathy with his knees hitting the underside of the table. Mr. Rinaldi, Brandon stammered, his voice cracking an octave higher than usual. I didn't know. I was just... The question isn't what you know, Brandon, the man said. His thumb brushed casually against the fabric of Brandon's cheap jacket. A gesture that looked gentle but clearly held Brandon pinned in place. The question is why you are breathing my air. Vanessa stared. Who was this? And how did Brandon know him? The man leaned down. Vanessa finally saw his face. He was striking. That was the only word for it. He had hair as black as ink, cut short and precise. His skin was pale, contrasting sharply with the dark, heavy brows that framed eyes of the deepest brown Vanessa had ever seen. They were intelligent eyes. Predator's eyes, devoid of mercy, but filled with a terrifying calm. He wore a black suit that fit him so perfectly it looked like it had been sculpted onto his broad shoulders. He brought his face close to Brandon's ear, but his eyes locked onto Vanessa's. He didn't blink. "You're in my seat," he said. The words were spoken softly, almost a whisper, but they carried the force of a thunderclap. Brandon scrambled. He moved with the desperate, flailing energy of a trapped animal. He pushed the chair back so hard it nearly tipped over, stumbling to his feet. "I'm going! I'm going!" Brandon squeaked, backing away, his hands raised in surrender. "I didn't touch her. I swear, Mr. Rinaldi. I was just leaving." "Run!" the man said. One word. Brandon didn't need to be told twice. He turned and sprinted towards the exit, knocking into a waiter carrying a tray of drinks, not even stopping to apologize as glasses shattered on the floor. He burst through the front doors and vanished into the night. Silence descended on the table. Vanessa sat frozen, her heart racing so fast she thought she might pass out. She looked at the man standing there. The staff of the restaurant, who had previously been so haughty, were now averting their eyes, busying themselves with tasks, terrified of intervening. The man straightened his jacket, brushed an invisible speck of dust from his sleeve, and then calmly pulled out the chair Brandon had vacated. He sat down with a fluid, controlled grace. He looked at Vanessa. For the first time, she saw him fully. He was terrifyingly handsome, but the emphasis was on terrifying. He occupied the space with an authority that made the restaurant feel small. "Vanessa Collins," he said. It wasn't a question. He knew who she was. "Yes," she breathed. "And you are?" "Silvio Rinaldi." Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face. Rinaldi. The name was whispered in Chicago. It was a name associated with construction, with unions, with shipping, and with a dozen other things that never made it into the official papers but ended up in police files that mysteriously disappeared. She was sitting across from the head of the Rinaldi crime family. I think there's been a mistake," Vanessa said, reaching for her purse again. "I should go." "Sit," Silvio said. It wasn't shouted. It was a command delivered with absolute assurance that it would be obeyed. Vanessa stopped. Her body reacted before her mind did, settling back into the booth. Silvio raised a single finger. Instantly, the snooty waiter from before materialized at the table, looking pale and sweating slightly. "Mr. Rinaldi," the waiter said, his voice trembling. "An honor. We didn't expect—" "Menu," Silvio interrupted. "And the wine list. The Barolo. The 98. Immediately, sir." The waiter practically bowed and scrambled away. Silvio turned his dark gaze back to Vanessa. He studied her. He didn't look at her the way Brandon did, searching for flaws to pick at. He looked at her like he was appraising a building he intended to buy, checking the foundation, the structure, the value. His eyes swept over her face, down to her throat, over the curve of her bust in the burgundy dress, and then back to her eyes. Vanessa felt exposed, but strangely, not ashamed. His gaze was heavy, physical. "You look terrified," he observed. "You just threatened a man out of the building," Vanessa pointed out, surprised by her own boldness. "And everyone in here looks like they're afraid to breathe too loud near you. Brandon owed me money. Gambling debts. He is a leech," Silvio said dismissively, as if Brandon were an insect he had removed from a picnic. But he was right about one thing. Vanessa stiffened, bracing herself. Here it comes. The weight comment, the insult. "He shouldn't have been sitting there," Silvio continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming intimate and gravelly. He lacked the capacity to appreciate the view. Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me?" "The dress," Silvio said, gesturing vaguely with his hand. "Burgundy. It suits you. Most women wear black to hide. You wear color like a challenge. I like it." Vanessa was speechless. She opened her mouth to respond, but the waiter returned with the wine and 2 large menus. Silvio waved the menus away. "Bring the antipasto platter, the large one. Then the osso buco for me, and for the lady." He looked at her. "Do you like truffle pasta?" Yes, but—" "The truffle tagliatelle, and the sea base, and the risotto. Bring it all," Silvio ordered. "All of it, sir?" the waiter asked, eyes widening. Did I stutter? Silvio's voice remained calm, but the threat was there, sharp as a razor. "No, sir, right away." When they were alone again, Vanessa found her voice. "Mr. Rinaldi, I can't eat all that, and I can't pay for it. The bakery. I'm not asking you to pay, Vanessa, he said, pouring the wine into her glass himself. The red liquid swirled, dark and rich. And I'm not asking you to eat it all alone. I enjoy a woman who eats. It shows vitality, appetite. He took a sip of his wine, watching her over the rim of the glass. Eat, drink. Then we discuss business. Vanessa took the glass. Her hand was steadier now. The surreal nature of the evening had numbed her panic into a strange curiosity. She drank. The wine was exquisite, velvet on her tongue. What business? She asked. Jessica said you needed a date, but men like you don't need blind dates to find women. Silvio set his glass down. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, mirroring the position Brandon had taken. But where Brandon had been intrusive, Silvio was conspiratorial. You are correct. I don't need a date, I need a wife. Vanessa choked on her wine. She coughed, patting her chest. A what? A wife, Silvio repeated calmly. A fiancé, initially, for a period of 1 year. You're joking, Vanessa said. I don't even know you. You don't know me. I know you own Sweet Haven Bakery on 4th Street, Silvio recited, ticking points off on his fingers. I know you inherited it from your grandmother, Rose. I know you are 3 months behind on your mortgage, 2 months behind on supplier payments, and that the city inspector is coming next week to check your ventilation system, which will fail because you can't afford the repairs. You need $80,000 to clear the immediate debt, and another $40,000 to stabilize the business. Vanessa stared at him, horror dawning. How do you know that? Did you investigate me? I investigate everyone I intend to do business with, Silvio said. Jessica recommended you. She said you were hardworking, loyal to a fault, and desperate enough to listen. That's incredibly insulting, Vanessa said, though she couldn't deny the accuracy. It is pragmatic, Silvio countered. Here's the situation, Vanessa. I am expanding my legitimate business interests, real estate, construction. To secure a contract for the new waterfront development, I need the approval of the city council. The chairman is a man of traditional values. He trusts family men. He does not trust bachelors with rumors of criminal ties. So you want to rent a family, Vanessa summarized, her brow furrowing. I want to project stability, Silvio corrected. I need a woman who looks like she belongs in a home, not a nightclub. Someone who works with her hands. A baker. It's wholesome. It's perfect. And in exchange? In exchange, I write a check tomorrow morning for the full amount of your debts. All of them. The mortgage, the suppliers, the repairs. I will also provide a monthly stipend for your personal expenses. You will live in my house, for appearance's sake. But you will have your own wing. You will accompany me to events. You will smile. You will wear the ring. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a velvet box. He placed it on the table and slid it across the white tablecloth. Vanessa looked at the box. It sat there like a bomb. And after the year is up? She asked. We divorce amicably. You keep the bakery, free and clear. You keep the stipend money you saved. We go our separate ways. And if I say no? Silvio leaned back. Then you finish your wine, I pay for dinner, and you go home. Next week, the inspector shuts down your bakery. The bank forecloses the month after. You lose your grandmother's legacy. He didn't say it with malice. He was just stating facts. It was a cold equation, and Silvio Rinaldi was a mathematician of power. The waiter arrived with the appetizers. Plates of cured meats, cheeses, olives, and warm focaccia filled the table. The smell was intoxicating. Vanessa's stomach roared, betraying her. She looked at the food. Then she looked at the velvet box. Then she looked at Silvio. He wasn't looking at the box. He was watching her face, his dark eyes reading every micro-expression. Why me? She asked softly. Really? There are thousands of women who would jump at this. Because when that piece of filth insulted you, Silvio said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet register again. You didn't cry. You got angry. You told him to leave. You have a spine, Vanessa. I need a woman who can stand next to me and not crumble when the world gets loud and... Me, he paused, his gaze drifting over her shoulders, down to her arms. And I meant what I said about the dress. I have no interest in women who look like they might break if I hold them too tight. The air between them crackled. Vanessa felt a flush that had nothing to do with embarrassment, and everything to do with the raw, masculine approval radiating from him. It was confusing. It was dangerous. But the alternative was losing Sweet Haven. The bakery was the only thing she had left of her grandmother. The only place she felt she belonged. Without it, she was just Vanessa, the divorced girl with the debt and the bad luck. She reached out and took the velvet box. The hinges snapped open. Inside, a diamond the size of a refined sugar cube glittered under the chandelier light. It was absurd. It was beautiful. "It's a business deal," Vanessa stated, needing to hear it aloud. "Strictly business. A contract," Silvio agreed. "I protect your bakery. You protect my image." Vanessa took a deep breath. She thought of the pink notice on her kitchen counter. She thought of Brandon's laughing face. She thought of the empty bakery she might never unlock again if she walked away. She picked up the ring. It was heavy. She slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "You really ordered the risotto and the pasta?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Silvio's lips quirked. It wasn't quite a smile, but the corner of his mouth lifted. "And the sea base. We have a lot of planning to do, Tesoro. My treasure. You'll need the energy. Don't call me that," she said, picking up a fork. "If this is business, use my name. Vanessa," he corrected, dipping a piece of focaccia into olive oil. "Eat. The food here is the only thing worth the prices." Vanessa took a bite of the cheese. It was sharp and creamy. She looked at the man across from her, the monster who had just terrified her ex-husband into fleeing the state, the savior who was buying her life for a year. She took another bite. For the first time in months, the crushing weight on her chest felt a little lighter. She was sitting in the devil's chair, eating his food, wearing his ring. "So," she said, cutting into a slice of prosciutto, "tell me about this city council chairman we need to fool." Silvio's eyes glinted with something that looked suspiciously like respect. He raised his glass. "His name is Patterson, and he is going to love you." Vanessa clinked her glass against his. The sound rang out clear and sharp, signaling the end of her old life and the beginning of something far more perilous. She didn't know yet that the danger wouldn't come from the man sitting across from her, but from the world he inhabited. For now, she just ate. And Silvio Rinaldi watched her with the patience of a wolf that had finally found its mate, even if neither of them admitted it yet. The waiter returned with the main courses, eyes widening as he found space for the steaming plates of risotto and the rich, dark osso buco. Vanessa felt self-conscious for a fleeting second as the plates piled up, but Silvio caught her eye. He didn't speak, but his gaze was an anchor. "You are in my seat," his eyes seemed to say, "and in my seat, you do as you please." She picked up her fork and dug into the risotto. It was creamy, rich with truffle oil. She moaned softly at the taste, closing her eyes for a second. When she opened them, Silvio was staring at her mouth, his pupils blown wide. He took a slow sip of his wine, never breaking contact. "Good?" he asked. "Incredible," she admitted. "Good," he said, his voice rough. "I intend to make sure you are satisfied, Vanessa. In all aspects of our agreement." Vanessa felt a shiver race down her spine. The line between business and whatever this was had just blurred, and the ink on the verbal contract wasn't even dry. But as she looked at the ring flashing on her hand, and the man who commanded the room with a tilt of his head, she decided she wouldn't run. She would stay. She would eat. And she would survive. The morning edition of the Chicago Tribune lay open on the stainless steel counter of Sweet Haven Bakery, the paper edges curling slightly from the heat of the ovens. The headline was bold, presumptuous, and impossible to ignore. Rinaldi's secret romance, the boss, and the confectioner. Beneath the text sat a grainy but undeniable photograph taken the previous night. It showed Silvio Rinaldi guiding Vanessa out of Le Magnifique, his hand placed possessively on the small of her back. The camera had caught her profile, the curve of her jaw, and the glint of the massive diamond on her finger, but it was the way Silvio loomed over her, protective, substantial, and terrifying, that dominated the frame. Vanessa stared at the image, her hands buried deep in a mound of sourdough. The rhythmic motion of kneading was usually her meditation, the only way to quiet the anxious hum in her mind. But today, even the familiar texture of the dough couldn't ground her. She looked at the ring on her left hand. It was coated in a fine layer of white flour, dulling its brilliance, but the weight of it remained constant. It felt heavier than the cast-iron skillets she hauled from the back room. "You look like you're trying to strangle that dough, Ness," a voice called out from the front. Vanessa looked up. Sarah, her assistant, and the only employee she hadn't had to let go during the financial drought, was leaning against the doorframe, eyeing the newspaper. "It's just strange," Vanessa admitted, pushing a stray lock of hair back with her forearm to avoid getting flour on her face. "Seeing myself there, next to him, it looks like a movie poster for something bad. It looks like you won the lottery," Sarah corrected, walking over to tap the picture of the diamond. "Do you know what people are saying? They're saying he's finally settling down, that he bought out your debt because he's smitten. If they only knew. If they only knew he's doing it to impress a city council chairman," Vanessa muttered, punching the dough down one last time. "It's a costume, Sarah. The ring, the dress, the dinner. It's all just high-stakes theater." "Well, the theater just paid our electricity bill," Sarah reminded her gently. "The lights are on, the ovens are hot, and we have 3 wedding cake orders since 8 a.m. People are curious. They want to buy bread from the woman who tamed the wolf." Vanessa sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. Sarah was right. The influx of cash Silvio had transferred that morning, an amount so large it made Vanessa dizzy to look at the banking app, had solved every immediate problem. The red ink was gone. The threat of eviction had evaporated. But in its place was a new kind of pressure. She was no longer just a baker. She was public property, and she was the declared property of a man who made police officers nervous. Across town, in a dilapidated apartment complex that smelled of mildew and stale grease, the newspaper had a very different effect. Brandon sat on the edge of a mattress that had seen better days, his hands shaking as he held the page up to the light of a flickering bulb. He read the headline again. Then he looked at the picture. He looked at the diamond on Vanessa's finger. "No way," he whispered, a hysterical giggle bubbling up in his throat. No freaking way. He had run from the restaurant the night before, terrified out of his mind. Rinaldi's reputation was not a myth. People who crossed the family didn't just get beaten up. They disappeared into the foundations of new high-rises. Brandon had spent the night shivering in a 24-hour laundromat, expecting a black car to pull up and finish him off. But now he saw this. She's marrying him? Brandon stood up, pacing the small room. He kicked a pile of empty takeout containers out of his way. "Vanessa? My Vanessa? The girl who cries over stray cats? She's playing house with the Rinaldi boss?" His phone buzzed on the floor. He didn't need to look to know who it was. The Albanians. He owed them $12,000, and the interest was compounding by the hour. They had given him until Friday. It was Thursday. Brandon looked back at the paper. Vanessa had always been soft. She was easy to manipulate. He had spent 5 years gaslighting her, making her feel small, taking her money, and convincing her it was her fault. She was weak. Even with Rinaldi in the picture, Brandon reasoned, she was still Vanessa. She was still the girl who couldn't say no to a sob story. And if she was marrying Rinaldi, she had access to cash. Real cash. "She owes me," Brandon muttered, his logic twisting into the deformed shape of an addict's justification. "I was her husband. I put up with her for years. She's sitting on a gold mine while I'm about to get my legs broken? That's not fair." He grabbed his jacket. It was thin and offered no protection against the Chicago winter, but the burning need in his gut kept him warm. He didn't need to rob a stranger. He just needed to go see his wife. Ex-wife. Whatever. She would pay. She always paid to make the noise stop. The bakery was quiet by 11 p.m. Sarah had gone home hours ago, urging Vanessa to do the same, but Vanessa had insisted on staying. The rhythmic work of the night shift was the only thing that felt normal. The rest of her life had spun off its axis. But here, in the kitchen, Things made sense. Flour. Water. Yeast. Heat. Predictable. Safe. She was finishing a tray of croissants, brushing them with egg wash, when the silence of the front room was shattered. It wasn't a knock. It was the distinct, sickening sound of tempered glass giving way under force. Vanessa froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She was in the back kitchen, separated from the front display area by swinging double doors. She reached for her phone, but her hands were covered in sticky dough. Nessie. The voice was slurred, familiar, and terrifying. I know you're in there. I saw the light. Brandon. Fear, cold and sharp, washed over her, but it was quickly followed by a surge of anger. This was her sanctuary. This was the place her grandmother had built. He had taken so much from her already, her confidence, her savings, her years, and now he was breaking into her haven. She wiped her hands frantically on her apron. Under the main prep table, installed just that morning by a team of silent men in gray coveralls, was a small red button. Silvio had pointed it out before he left her at the door. If you feel unsafe, he had said, press it. Do not hesitate. It bypasses the police and comes to me. Vanessa didn't hesitate. She slammed her palm against the button. It made no sound, gave no feedback, but she prayed it worked. The swinging doors flew open. Brandon stumbled into the kitchen. He looked manic. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, sweat beading on his forehead despite the freezing air drafting in from the broken window. He held a jagged piece of brick in one hand and a cheap switchblade in the other. Brandon, Vanessa said, her voice surprisingly steady. She backed up until her hips hit the heavy wooden work table. You need to leave. Now. Look at you. Brandon sneered, stepping closer. He waved the knife erratically, acting all high and mighty. I saw the paper, Vanessa. I saw the rock on your finger. You're rich now? You're sleeping with the devil and getting paid for it? I'm working, Vanessa said, her eyes tracking the knife. Go home, Brandon. I don't have a home, he screamed, the sound echoing off the tiled walls. Because I owe people money. And you're sitting here with diamonds while I'm sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Give me the ring. What? Give me the ring. Brandon lunged forward. I can pawn it. It'll pay off the Albanians and leave me enough to get out of town. You can get another one. Your new sugar daddy won't even notice. No, Vanessa said. She curled her left hand into a fist. Don't say no to me, Brandon shouted. He was close now. Too close. He smelled of cheap vodka and desperation. You don't get to say no. You're nothing without me. You're just a fat, pathetic baker who got lucky. Now give me the ring or I'll cut it off your finger. He reached for her. Vanessa didn't think. She didn't cower. She didn't cry. The memory of Silvio's words at dinner, "You have a spine, Vanessa," flashed through her mind. She grabbed the nearest thing at hand, a 5-pound bag of high-gluten flour that had been left open on the counter. As Brandon lunged, she swung the bag with all her strength. It connected with his chest and exploded upwards. A massive white cloud erupted in the kitchen, coating Brandon instantly. He gasped, inhaling the fine powder, and started to cough violently, blinding him. "You bitch!" he sputtered, rubbing his eyes. Vanessa didn't stop. She grabbed the heavy marble rolling pin from the table. As Brandon flailed blindly with the knife, slicing through the air, she swung the rolling pin low. It connected hard with his kneecap. Brandon howled, his leg buckling under him. He hit the floor, the knife skittering across the tiles. "Stay down!" Vanessa yelled, standing over him, the rolling pin raised like a club. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. "Don't you dare get up!" "I'm gonna kill you," Brandon wheezed, trying to crawl towards the knife. "I swear to God, Vanessa." He never got the chance. The back door of the bakery, the heavy steel-reinforced security door, was ripped open with such force it slammed against the wall. 3 men poured into the room. They moved with a fluidity and speed that was terrifying to witness. They wore dark tactical gear, not suits. Rinaldi's private security. The first man reached Brandon before Vanessa could even blink. He didn't shout commands. He didn't hesitate. He simply kicked Brandon in the ribs, flipping him onto his back, and then dropped a knee onto Brandon's throat, pinning him to the floor. The second man kicked the knife into the corner, then stepped on it to keep it out of reach. His hand stayed near his concealed sidearm, but he didn't raise it. Brandon was already controlled. The third man, older, with a scar running through his eyebrow, moved directly to Vanessa. He didn't touch her, but he placed himself physically between her and the threat, effectively becoming a human shield. "Miss Collins," the older man said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "Are you injured?" No," Vanessa stammered, lowering the rolling pin. Her adrenaline was starting to crash, and her hands began to shake. "I'm fine. He broke the window." "Secure him," the older man ordered the others. Brandon was dragged to his feet, zip-tied, and shoved against the refrigerator. He was coughing, covered in flour, looking like a ghostly, pathetic figure. He tried to speak, to beg, but the guard silenced him with a sharp look that promised violence. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. "Police," the older man noted, checking his watch. "Right on schedule. Mr. Rinaldi prefers official documentation for trespassing and assault. It makes the restraining order permanent." "Silvio called the police?" Vanessa asked. "Mr. Rinaldi alerted everyone," the guard replied. Then, the front chimes of the bakery jingled, a delicate, cheerful sound that was entirely out of place. Silvio Rinaldi walked in through the front entrance, stepping over the shattered glass of the display window. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat over a black turtleneck, looking like he had stepped out of a magazine shoot rather than into a crime scene. He didn't look at the police lights flashing outside. He didn't look at his guards. He didn't even look at Brandon, who whimpered at the sight of him. Silvio walked straight into the kitchen, his eyes locking onto Vanessa. He scanned her with laser intensity, checking her hands, her face, her posture. He saw the flour on her apron, the rolling pin she was still gripping, and the defiance in her eyes. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller. "Did he touch you?" Silvio asked. His voice was low, terrifyingly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a man deciding whether someone lived or died in the next 10 seconds. "No," Vanessa said. She finally set the rolling pin down. "He tried. I stopped him." Silvio looked past her, down at the floor where the flour bag had exploded, and then at Brandon, who was cowering against the fridge, white powder coating his cheap jacket. Silvio pieced together the scene instantly. He walked over to Brandon. The guard stepped back. Silvio leaned in close. Brandon was trembling so violently his teeth chattered. "You are lucky," Silvio whispered, loud enough for Vanessa to hear. "You are lucky she is a better person than I am. Because if she had not handled you, I would have removed you piece by piece." "I just wanted the ring," Brandon sobbed. "I owe the Albanians. They're going to kill me." Silvio straightened up, a look of disgust crossing his face. "The Albanians are a business problem. You are a pest. The police will take you now. You will go to jail for breaking and entering, attempted robbery, and assault. And inside, you will pray that I do not decide to reach you there." He signaled the guards. They dragged Brandon out the back door, just as the uniformed officers entered the front. Silvio turned his back on the commotion, focusing entirely on Vanessa. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and reached out, gently wiping a smudge of flour from her cheek. His touch was warm, startlingly tender after the violence of his words. "This is unacceptable," he stated. "I handled it," Vanessa said, trying to stop her knees from shaking. "I used the button. It worked. The button was a contingency. The glass should have been reinforced. The perimeter was weak." Silvio looked angry, but Vanessa realized with a jolt that he wasn't angry at her. He was angry at himself. "I underestimated his desperation. That was a mistake. I do not make mistakes twice." "It's over, Silvio. He's going to jail." "He is a symptom," Silvio said dismissively. "The window is broken. Your security is compromised. You cannot stay here tonight. I have to prep the dough for tomorrow," Vanessa argued weakly. "I can't just leave. The bakery is a crime scene. The police will seal it for the night. My team will board up the window and have a contractor here at 6:00 a.m. to replace the glass with bulletproof laminate." He grabbed her hand, the one with the ring, and squeezed it gently. "You are coming with me." "With you?" To your house? To my home, where I have walls that do not break, and men who do not let ex-husbands walk through the front door. His tone brooked no argument. Pack a bag, Vanessa. Just the essentials. You are not sleeping here again. Vanessa looked around her kitchen. The flour on the floor, the broken glass, the remnants of violence violating her safe space. She realized he was right. She couldn't stay here. The illusion of safety she had built around her solitary life had been shattered along with the window. Okay, she whispered. Okay. 10 minutes later, she was sitting in the passenger seat of Silvio's car, a sleek black sedan that smelled of leather and sandalwood. Her overnight bag was in the back. The city lights blurred past as they sped toward the skyline. The car was quiet, insulated from the noise of Chicago. The engine purred with a low, powerful vibration that traveled through the soles of her feet. Vanessa looked at her hands. They were clean now, but she could still feel the phantom weight of the rolling pin. Silvio? He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. His profile was sharp, illuminated by the passing streetlights. Yes? Thank you, she said. He frowned slightly. For what? I failed to prevent the intrusion. You had to defend yourself. For the alarm, she said firmly. She turned in her seat to look at him. And for coming. Brandon, he had a knife. He was crazy. If that button hadn't worked, or if your men hadn't been so close, I don't know what would have happened. Silvio's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. The leather creaked under the pressure. He had a knife, Silvio repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He hadn't seen the knife. It had been kicked away before he entered. The knowledge that the threat had been lethal, not just physical, shifted something in the atmosphere of the car. Yes, but I'm okay, Vanessa said softly. Because of you. So thank you. I mean it. I'm not used to anyone having my back. Silvio slowed the car as they approached the private ramp of a high-rise building. He stopped the vehicle at the security checkpoint, waiting for the gate to rise. He turned to her fully then. His dark eyes searched hers, looking for the lie, for the sarcasm, for the resentment he was used to seeing in people who owed him favors. He found none. He found only genuine, exhausted gratitude. She wasn't blaming him for the danger his world had brought to her door. She was thanking him for the shield he had offered. It disarmed him. You fought back, he said, his voice quiet in the cabin. You blinded him and you broke his knee. I grew up with 3 brothers and a grandmother who didn't take excuses, Vanessa said with a tired smile. And I really love that bakery. I wasn't going to let him rob me. Silvio reached out. For a second, Vanessa thought he was going to touch her face again. Instead, he took her hand, lifting it to inspect the knuckles, checking for bruises she might have missed. You are a dangerous woman, Vanessa Collins, he murmured. My men said you looked like a Valkyrie covered in flour. Is that a compliment? In my world. Silvio brought her hand to his lips, brushing a kiss against her knuckles that sent a jolt of electricity straight to her heart. It is the highest compliment possible. The gate rose. Silvio drove the car into the underground sanctuary of his building. We are here, he announced. My penthouse is on the top floor. You will have the guest suite. It has a lock on the inside. You are safe now. Vanessa nodded, feeling a heavy wave of fatigue finally crash over her. What about Brandon? You said the Albanians. Brandon is in police custody, Silvio said, his voice hardening. He is safe from the Albanians for tonight. But the Albanians, they are a different problem. They saw the news too. They know you are with me. Does that mean I'm a target? It means, Silvio said, killing the engine and plunging them into darkness, that you are the most valuable thing in this city right now. And I do not let anyone touch what is mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. It was primal, archaic, but after the glass, the knife, and the cold wind of the broken window, Vanessa didn't feel fear. She felt, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly protected. She opened the door. Then lead the way, Silvio. I'm tired of fighting alone. Silvio got out and walked around the car to open her door, offering her his hand. As she took it, she realized that the contract, the business deal for 1 year, had already shifted. It wasn't just about appearances anymore. He had given her a weapon, and she had used it. They were partners in violence now. And as they walked toward the elevator, Vanessa Collins, the baker who wore burgundy to defy the world, realized she didn't want to let go of the Mafia boss's hand. The penthouse was not a home. It was a glass cage suspended 50 stories above the Chicago skyline. Everything in Silvio Rinaldi's sanctuary was sleek, monochrome, and cold. The floors were polished black marble that seemed to swallow the light. The furniture was angular Italian leather that looked uncomfortable to sit on. And the walls were adorned with abstract art that cost more than Vanessa's entire bakery, but evoked zero emotion. There were no photographs, no knickknacks, no signs that a human being actually lived there, only that a very wealthy ghost haunted the premises. Vanessa had been living in the guest wing for 3 days, and the silence was beginning to itch under her skin. She had spent the first 24 hours sleeping, the adrenaline crash from the break-in leaving her comatose. But now, she was awake. She was restless. And she was hungry. More importantly, she needed to bake. It was a compulsion, a way to reclaim control when her world felt like it was spinning off its axis. When Silvio stepped out of the private elevator at 7 in the evening, loosening his silk tie, he stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't smell the usual sterile scent of ozone and expensive cleaning products. He smelled garlic. He smelled roasting tomatoes. He smelled yeast and caramelized sugar. He walked into the open-concept kitchen, a space that was usually pristine and empty, and found chaos. Vanessa was there, wearing one of his spare black t-shirts that hung loosely over her leggings, her hair tied up in a messy bun secured with a chopstick. She had music playing from her phone, some old Motown track, and she was dancing slightly as she pulled a tray of focaccia out of the industrial oven. "What are you doing?" Silvio asked. Vanessa jumped, nearly dropping the tray. She spun around, breathless, her face flushed from the heat of the oven. "Jesus, you move like a vampire." "Put a bell on, Rinaldi." Silvio walked further into the room, eyeing the flour dusted across his black granite countertops. "You are cooking." "I'm stress baking," she corrected. "And then I got hungry. And I assumed you eat something other than the souls of your enemies, so I made lasagna, from scratch. The pasta sheets are drying over there." She pointed to a rack she had improvised using 2 chairs and a broom handle. Silvio stared at the broom handle. "You have improvised drying racks in a kitchen that cost $500,000. Well, your kitchen has 42 different knives, but not a single pasta dryer. It's a disgrace," she retorted, turning back to the focaccia and brushing it with olive oil and rosemary. "Dinner is in 20 minutes. Go wash up. You look like you've had a day." Silvio didn't move. He watched her. He was used to coming home to silence, or to a housekeeper who made herself invisible. He wasn't used to life. Vibrant, messy, loud life. "I usually order in," he said. "Not tonight," Vanessa stated firmly. "Sit, eat. Consider it part of the Happy Domestic Fiancé performance review." 20 minutes later, Silvio Rinaldi, the boss who controlled the unions and the shipping docks, was sitting at his kitchen island, eating lasagna that burned his tongue and tasted like comfort. He ate silently, methodically, but with a growing intensity. Vanessa sat across from him, tearing into a piece of focaccia. She didn't pick at her food. She ate with genuine pleasure, closing her eyes as she chewed. "You're staring," she said without opening her eyes. "I have never seen a woman eat with such lack of inhibition," Silvio admitted. "Most women I dine with push the food around the plate." "Life's too short for salad without dressing, Silvio," she said, wiping a smudge of tomato sauce from her lip. "My grandmother used to say that you can't trust people who don't eat. It means they're hiding something." "I hide many things," Silvio said darkly. "Does that mean you don't trust me?" "I trust you to keep me safe," Vanessa replied, meeting his gaze. "I trust you to keep your word about the bakery. The rest? I think you're just lonely and you have too much money to know how to fix it." Silvio froze. The fork hovered halfway to his mouth. No one spoke to him like that. No one dared to analyze him, let alone pity him. But instead of anger, he felt a strange, twisting sensation in his gut. "Finish your wine," he said abruptly, standing up and taking his plate to the sink. "Tomorrow we have an appointment. You need clothes. The gala is coming up, and my team tells me you have nothing appropriate for the season." "I have clothes," Vanessa protested. "You have aprons and sweaters," Silvio corrected. "Tomorrow we go to Madame Elise's. Be ready at 10. Madame Elise's was not a store. It was a temple of exclusion. Located on the Magnificent Mile, it had no price tags, no sale racks, and a security guard who looked like he had served in special ops. The interior was all cream and gold, designed to make anyone who wasn't a size 0 feel large and intrusive. When Vanessa walked in, flanked by Silvio and 2 of his guards, the atmosphere in the boutique shifted instantly. The hush that fell over the room wasn't just respectful, it was terrified. Silvio didn't wait for a greeting. He walked to the center of the room and sat on a velvet ottoman, crossing his legs. "We need a gown for the winter gala, and a wardrobe for the season. Coats, daywear, shoes." The manager, a thin woman with a pinched nose and a fake smile, hurried over. "Mr. Rinaldi, an honor, and this must be—" Her eyes slid over Vanessa, assessing her size with a microscopic sneer that Vanessa was intimately familiar with. "The lucky lady. Vanessa," Vanessa said, extending her hand. The woman touched it briefly, as if afraid she might catch something. "Of course. If you'll follow me, Miss Vanessa. We have a lovely selection of wraps and shawls in the back room." "I don't need a shawl," Vanessa said. "I need a dress." "Well, naturally," the woman twittered nervously. "But given your figure, we find that looser cuts, perhaps something in a nice matte black with a heavy drape, are most flattering." To minimize the silhouette, Vanessa felt the familiar sting of shame. It was the same everywhere. Hide, cover up, minimize. She looked at the racks of tiny, delicate gowns and felt like a bull in a china shop. "I don't want to minimize," Vanessa started to say. But Silvio's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. "Stop." The single word silenced the room. Silvio stood up slowly. He walked over to the manager, towering over her. "Did I ask you to hide her?" he asked softly. I beg your pardon, sir?" the manager stammered. "I asked if I hired you to camouflage my fiancé like a piece of defective furniture," Silvio clarified, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Because I was under the impression I came here to dress her, not to bury her in fabric. I was only suggesting for her body type. Her body type is perfect," Silvio stated. He turned to Vanessa. "Take off your coat." Vanessa hesitated, then shed her winter coat. She was wearing a simple wrap dress that clung to her curves. She felt exposed under the bright lights. But Silvio's gaze wasn't critical. It was possessive. "Look at her," Silvio commanded the manager. "She has a waist. She has hips. She is a woman, not a coat hanger. If you bring me a shapeless sack, I will buy this building and turn it into a parking lot. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mr. Rinaldi. Perfectly." The woman was pale. "Bring me color," Silvio ordered. "Jewel tones, silk, velvet, something that screams." For the next 2 hours, the boutique became a flurry of activity. Assistants ran back and forth with armfuls of fabric. Vanessa tried on emerald greens, sapphire blues, and deep rubies, but it was the purple dress that stopped the room. It was a deep, royal purple, the color of bruised plums and royalty. It was silk satin, cut on the bias so it flowed over her body like liquid water. It had a plunging neckline and a slit that went up to her thigh, exposing her leg. It was tight, unapologetically tight, hugging her bust, her stomach, her hips. Vanessa stepped out of the fitting room and stood in front of the 3-way mirror. She held her breath. She looked powerful. She didn't look thin. She looked substantial. She looked like a queen. She turned to Silvio. He wasn't looking at the dress. He was looking at her face, then slowly, agonizingly slowly, dragging his gaze down her body. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the brown of his irises. "Turn around," he whispered. Vanessa turned. The back of the dress dipped low, exposing her spine. "That one," Silvio said hoarsely. "It's a bit much," the manager tried to say, recovering some of her snobbery. Perhaps a bolero jacket to cover the arms? Silvio didn't even look at the woman. Burn the bolero. She wears the dress as it is. We don't hide works of art in the basement. He stood up and walked over to Vanessa. He stood behind her, his dark suit contrasting with the vibrant purple. He met her eyes in the mirror. "You are breathtaking," he said, his voice rough. "Do not let anyone ever tell you to cover this up." Vanessa felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from a sudden, overwhelming sense of being seen. For years, Brandon had told her she was too much, too loud, too big, too emotional. Silvio looked at her too much and demanded more. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll take the dress. We will take everything," Silvio corrected. "And the manager is fired. I don't like her attitude." As they left the store, leaving a weeping manager and a beaming assistant who had just been promoted, Vanessa slipped her hand into Silvio's. He squeezed it instantly, his grip firm and grounding. The bubble of domestic safety and luxury burst 2 days later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Vanessa was in the penthouse library, trying to organize the bakery's accounts on her laptop, when her phone rang. It was Sarah. "Ness?" Sarah's voice was high, pitched with panic. "Ness, you need to come, or send someone. It's bad." Vanessa's blood ran cold. "What happened? Is everyone okay?" "We're okay. The staff is okay. But it's the warehouse, the supply depot on 5th. Ness, it's gone." "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "Fire," Sarah sobbed. "Someone firebombed the delivery truck while it was parked in the bay. The fire spread to the flour storage. The sprinklers went off, but the water damage destroyed what the fire didn't. We lost everything. The wedding orders, the special imports, the new packaging. It's all ruined." Vanessa didn't scream. She didn't cry. She went numb. That warehouse held $50,000 worth of inventory. It was the backbone of her business. She hung up the phone and walked out to the living room where Silvio was having a meeting with his underboss, a man named Marco. "They burned the warehouse," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection. Silvio stopped mid-sentence. He looked up, seeing her face. He stood up immediately, waving Marco away. Marco gathered his files and vanished. "Who?" Silvio asked, crossing the room to her. "Sarah said it was a firebomb. The truck. The flour. It's the Albanians, isn't it?" She looked up at him. "They couldn't get to me, so they went after the business." Silvio's jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. He looked ready to destroy something. "Vanessa, was Jerry inside?" she asked suddenly. Silvio blinked, confused. "Who?" "Jerry, the driver. He usually naps in the cab between shifts on Tuesdays." "Was he inside the truck?" Silvio pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and spoke rapid-fire Italian. He listened, his eyes never leaving Vanessa's face. He hung up. "The truck was empty," Silvio said. "No casualties. The staff got out. It was purely property damage." Vanessa let out a breath she had been holding, her shoulders sagging. She covered her face with her hands. "Thank God. Thank God." Silvio watched her, stunned. "You just lost your inventory. Your livelihood is compromised. And you are asking about the driver. Inventory is just flour and sugar, Silvio," she said, dropping her hands. "I can buy more flour. I can't replace Jerry. He has 3 kids. I will kill them," Silvio said. The words were simple, factual. "I will burn their operations to the ground." "No," Vanessa said. She stepped closer to him. "You won't just kill them. You'll handle it. But right now, I need to know. Does your insurance cover arson?" "My insurance covers everything," Silvio said intensely. "I own the insurance company. Vanessa, I will write a check today. You will not lose a single dollar. I will triple the inventory. I will buy you a fleet of trucks." "I don't want a fleet," she said. "I just want to know that this ends. I can't have people getting hurt because of me, because of this ring." "It ends," Silvio vowed. He reached out and cupped her face. His hands were large, warm and trembling slightly with suppressed rage. "I swear to you, Vanessa, this was their last mistake. They touched what provides for you. That is an act of war. He expected her to pull away. He expected her to scream that this was his fault, that his world was toxic. Instead, Vanessa leaned into his touch. She rested her cheek against his palm, closing her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "I believe you. Just hold me for a minute. Please?" The vulnerability in her voice shattered his restraint. He pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her so tightly it was almost painful. She buried her face in the crook of his neck, inhaling the scent of sandalwood and expensive tobacco. She didn't cry. She just drew strength from him, solid and unmoving as a mountain. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." That night, the penthouse felt different. The air was charged, heavy with the unspoken violence of the day and the raw emotional intimacy that had followed. Silvio had spent the afternoon barking orders into his phone, organizing a retaliation that would be swift and silent. Vanessa had spent it coordinating with Sarah, reassuring her staff, and organizing temporary supplies from a friendly competitor. They had worked in parallel, a team operating in different trenches. Now, it was midnight. The city lights below were a carpet of diamonds. Vanessa stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room, wearing a silk robe she had bought at the boutique. She was looking out at the darkness, thinking about the fire, about Brandon, about how her life had become a thriller novel. She heard Silvio enter. He didn't speak. He walked up behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. But he didn't touch her. "You should sleep," he said softly. "I can't," she admitted. "My mind is racing. Every time I close my eyes, I see smoke." "I will make it stop," Silvio said. "The Albanians will be gone by morning." "It's not that." Vanessa turned around. The robe slipped slightly, revealing the curve of her shoulder. "It's just, I realize today that I'm not afraid of you. I should be. You're a dangerous man, Silvio. You talk about war like it's a business transaction. But when I heard about the fire, my first thought wasn't to run from you. It was to run to you." Silvio stared at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools. "You are running to a monster, Vanessa." "Maybe." She stepped closer. "But you're my monster. You protected me. You validated me. You stood up for me in that store when I couldn't stand up for myself. You ate my lasagna." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The lasagna was excellent." "I'm tired of being scared, Silvio," she whispered. "I'm tired of feeling like I take up too much space. With you, I feel like I fit." Silvio groaned, a low sound in his throat. He reached out and grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against him. The contact was electric. "You fit," he growled. "You fit perfectly. Do you have any idea how hard it is to keep my hands off you? To play the gentleman? I am not a gentleman, Vanessa." "I don't want a gentleman," she said, her hands moving up to grip the lapels of his shirt. "I want the man who told me not to hide." Silvio didn't wait. He crashed his mouth down on hers. The kiss wasn't tentative. It was acclaiming. It was hungry and desperate, and filled with all the words they hadn't said. Vanessa opened to him, her hands tangling in his short hair, pulling him closer. He tasted of scotch and desire. He swept her up into his arms, carrying her effortlessly. Vanessa wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in his neck. He carried her to the master bedroom, a room she had never entered. It was dark, dominated by a massive bed with black silk sheets. He laid her down, following her down instantly, his weight a heavy, comforting blanket. "Tell me to stop," he warned, hovering over her, his eyes scanning her face. "Tell me to leave, and I will walk out that door and sleep on the floor." "Don't you dare," she breathed. He untied her robe. It fell open. Vanessa felt a flicker of the old insecurity. The bright lights of the city filtered in through the window. She wasn't wearing shapewear. She wasn't posing. She was just there, soft and curved and real. "Silvio, She started to cover herself. He caught her hands. He pinned them to the mattress above her head. "No," he commanded. "Look at me." She looked at him. "You are magnificent," he said, his voice thick with reverence. "Every inch of you. Softness where I am hard. Warmth where I am cold. He lowered his head and kissed the curve of her hip. Vanessa gasped. He kissed her stomach, murmuring Italian praises against her skin. He didn't rush past the parts of her body she had learned to hate. He lingered on them. He worshipped them. Beautiful. He whispered against her skin. A queen. When he finally entered her, it was slow, intense, and earth-shattering. There was no pain, only a sense of absolute fullness. Vanessa cried out, arching against him, and Silvio caught her cry with his mouth. Mine. He growled against her lips. You are mine, Vanessa. No one hurts you. No one touches you. I will burn the world before I let you go. I'm yours. She sobbed, clutching his shoulders. I'm yours. It wasn't just sex. It was a sealing of the pact. In the darkness of the penthouse, amidst the ruins of her bakery and the threats of a turf war, Vanessa Collins found her sanctuary. It wasn't in a building. It was in the arms of the man who looked at her scars and her curves and saw a masterpiece. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets. Silvio pulled the duvet up over them, tucking it around her shoulders with surprising gentleness. He pulled her back against his chest, his arm draped protectively over her waist. The gala is in 2 days, he said into the silence, his voice sleepy but alert. I know, Vanessa murmured, tracing the muscles of his forearm. You will wear the purple dress, he said, and you will wear the necklace I have in the safe, and everyone in that room will know exactly who you belong to. Is that a threat, Mr. Rinaldi? She teased sleepily. It is a promise, Mrs. Rinaldi to be. He kissed the top of her head. Sleep now. Tomorrow we rebuild your empire. Tonight, you just rest. Vanessa closed her eyes. The fear of the Albanians was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. But as she drifted off to the steady rhythm of Silvio's heartbeat, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the consort. And God help anyone who tried to burn her down again. The Rinaldi Foundation Winter Gala was not merely a party. It was a coronation, held in the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel. It was the singular night of the year where the lines between Chicago's legitimate elite and its shadow rulers blurred under the cover of charity and champagne. For Vanessa, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the penthouse dressing room, it felt less like a celebration and more like preparing for battle. She smoothed her hands down the front of the dress Silvio had commissioned for her. It was not the purple silk she had worn at the boutique, though that hung in her closet like a trophy. This was something else entirely. It was liquid gold. The fabric was a heavy, metallic lame that looked like molten metal poured directly over her skin. It possessed no structure of its own, relying entirely on her body to give it shape. It clung to the slope of her breasts, cinched tight at her waist, and flared dramatically over her hips, cascading to the floor in a pool of shimmering light. It was a dress that demanded attention, a dress that refused to apologize for the space it occupied. Turn around. Silvio's voice came from the doorway. Vanessa didn't jump. She had grown used to the way he moved, silent as a panther on the marble floors. She turned slowly, the gold fabric catching the light with every movement. Silvio stood in the frame, wearing a tuxedo that fit him with lethal precision. The stark black of the wool made his skin look paler, his eyes darker. He stopped a few feet away from her, his hands twitching at his sides as if he were restraining himself from reaching out. He didn't say a word. He just looked. He looked at her with a hunger that made her knees weak, a raw, possessive intensity that stripped away the air in the room. Is it too much? Vanessa asked, her voice breathless. I feel like a walking Oscar statue. You look like a deity, Silvio corrected, his voice rough. He stepped closer, entering her personal space. You look like something men would start wars over. Gold was the right choice. It is the only metal precious enough to touch you. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a long, flat velvet case. Turn around again, hair up. Vanessa obeyed, sweeping her heavy brown curls off her neck. She felt the cold metal of a necklace against her skin, followed by the warmth of Silvio's fingers as he fastened the clasp. Look, he commanded. Vanessa looked in the mirror. Resting against her collarbone was a necklace of yellow diamonds, heavy and intricate. It was a piece of jewelry that cost more than her entire neighborhood block. "Silvio," she whispered, touching the stones. I can't wear this. It's too much responsibility." "It is not a gift," Silvio said, his eyes meeting hers in the reflection. He placed his hands on her bare shoulders, his thumbs tracing the line of her neck. "It is a collar. Tonight, everyone in that room needs to know exactly who you are. You are not just my fiancé. You are the Rinaldi matriarch. You wear the family vault around your neck, so that the wolves know you are protected." "The wolves," Vanessa repeated, the reality of the evening settling in. The fire at the warehouse had been extinguished, the mess cleaned up, but the threat of the Albanian faction still loomed like smoke in a dark room. "Do you think they'll be there tonight?" "The Albanians were not invited, but their eyes will be watching," Silvio said, his expression hardening. "Security is tighter than the White House. I have 50 men in the perimeter. You are safe, Vanessa. I promise you." He turned her around to face him, his grip on her shoulders firm. "But you stay by my side. You do not go to the restroom alone. You do not step out for air. If you need anything, you tell me." "Understood." "Understood." She nodded. He leaned down and kissed her, careful not to ruin her lipstick, but the press of his mouth was firm, a seal of ownership. "Then let us go. The city is waiting to meet its queen." The ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns, a cacophony of polite laughter and clinking crystal. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money. When Silvio and Vanessa appeared at the top of the grand staircase, the room didn't just go quiet. It halted. Vanessa felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes landing on her. A month ago, she would have wanted to shrink, to fold herself into a corner and disappear. She would have tugged at her dress, worried about the roll of her stomach or the width of her arms. But tonight, she felt the heavy gold fabric hugging her like armor. She felt the weight of the diamonds at her throat. And most importantly, she felt Silvio's hand on the small of her back. A burning brand of support. They descended the stairs. Flashbulbs popped from the press pen near the entrance, blinding white explosions that captured the moment. "Smile," Silvio murmured in her ear. "They are terrified of us. Let them see we are untouchable." Vanessa smiled. It wasn't the polite, apologetic smile of the girl who served cookies. It was a sharp, confident curve of her lips that she had learned from him. As they reached the floor, the crowd parted. People who wouldn't have looked twice at Vanessa Collins, the baker, were now clamoring to shake the hand of Vanessa Collins, the future Mrs. Rinaldi. "Silvio, wonderful to see you." A portly man with a red face and a sash indicating he was a city official bustled over. This was Councilman Patterson, the target of their entire charade, and this must be the lady responsible for domesticating the tiger, Vanessa. Silvio introduced her, his voice smooth as silk. "My fiancé, the heart of my home." "A pleasure, Councilman," Vanessa said, extending her hand. "Silvio speaks highly of your work with the zoning committee." Patterson beamed, pumping her hand. "Charmed, truly charmed. I must say, Rinaldi, you've outdone yourself. A baker, salt of the earth. We need more traditional family values in this city, none of these flighty models you used to parade around. This is a woman of substance." "She is everything," Silvio agreed, his eyes not leaving Vanessa's face. The night blurred into a series of handshakes and shallow conversations. Vanessa played her part perfectly. She discussed the bakery, she laughed at bad jokes, she deflected questions about the wedding date with coy smiles. Throughout it all, Silvio remained a constant presence at her side. He was charming, attentive, the perfect doting fiancé, but Vanessa could feel the tension radiating off him. His eyes were constantly moving, scanning the perimeter, checking the exits, watching the waiters. "Vanessa!" The voice cut through the drone of the string quartet. Vanessa turned to see Jessica weaving through the crowd. Her friend looked pale in a silver-sheathed dress, her eyes wide and anxious. "Jess," Vanessa breathed, stepping away from a boring conversation about municipal bonds. Jessica practically collapsed into Vanessa, hugging her tightly. "Oh my God, Ness. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." "Sorry for what?" Vanessa asked, pulling back to look at her friend. "For everything. For the fire. I saw the news about the warehouse." Jessica whispered frantically. "I set you up with him because I thought you'd get some money and pay off the bank. I didn't think you'd get targeted by a mob war. If anything happens to you, I'll never forgive myself." Vanessa gripped Jessica's arms. "Jess, breathe. I'm okay. Look at me. I'm fine. You're wearing a diamond necklace worth more than my life." Jessica hissed. "That's not fine, Ness. That's hazard pay. You have to get out. Maybe we can call the FBI, maybe—" "I don't want to get out," Vanessa said. The words came out before she could filter them, honest and stark. Jessica froze. "What?" "I love him," Vanessa admitted. It was the first time she had said it aloud to anyone other than herself. He's not what you think, Jess. He protects me. He sees me. The bakery is safe because of him. I'm safe because of him. He's a criminal, Vanessa. He's a man who burns down the world for me," Vanessa corrected. "I'm staying, not because of the contract, because I choose him." Jessica stared at her, searching her face for signs of coercion. She must have found the truth in Vanessa's eyes, because her shoulders slumped. "You really love him." "Yeah, I really do." "Then God help you," Jessica sighed, squeezing her hand. "But you look incredible." "That dress is a weapon, Ness." Silvio picked it out. Vanessa grinned. Just then, Silvio materialized at her side. "Everything all right?" He looked at Jessica with cool detachment. "We're good," Vanessa said, linking her arm through his. "Just catching up." "Good. Councilman Patterson wants to make a toast. We need to be near the stage." They moved toward the front of the room. The crowd was dense here. Waiters with silver trays circulated, offering more champagne. The air was getting warm, stifling. Vanessa scanned the room, a habit she had picked up from Silvio in the last few days. She watched the faces in the crowd. The bored wives, the ambitious young men, the tired service staff. Her eyes landed on a waiter near the edge of the stage. He was thin, his uniform slightly too large for his frame. He was trembling, the champagne flutes on his tray rattling softly against each other. He looked sick, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Vanessa frowned. There was something familiar about the slope of his shoulders, the nervous tick of his head. He turned slightly. It was Brandon. Vanessa's breath hitched. How? How was he here? He was supposed to be in jail. Silvio had said the charges were sticky. Breaking and entering. Assault. He shouldn't be out on bail. "Silvio," she whispered, her fingers digging into his bicep. "Not now, Tesoro." "My treasure," Silvio murmured, his attention focused on the stage where Patterson was tapping a microphone. "The speech is starting." "Silvio, look," she hissed urgently. "The waiter, at 3:00. Silvio turned his head, his annoyance vanishing instantly as he followed her gaze. He saw Brandon. His body went rigid, not with surprise, but with instant calculation. His hand tightened around her waist, subtle as a warning. "Eyes forward," he murmured. "Stay at my side." Brandon wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the crowd, his eyes darting wildly. He looked terrified. He wasn't acting like an assassin. He was acting like a cornered animal. He took a step forward, shouting something incoherent. "You think you're better than me?" Brandon screamed, his voice cracking. He threw the tray of champagne onto the floor. The crash of breaking glass silenced the room instantly. "You're all filth. You think money makes you clean?" The crowd gasped and recoiled. Security guards began to move in from the perimeter, pushing through the confused guests. "It's a distraction," Silvio said, his voice ice cold. He wasn't looking at Brandon anymore. He was scanning the room, scanning the balconies, scanning the shadows. "He is the bait." Brandon continued to scream, flailing his arms, drawing every eye in the room toward him. "Look at me. I'm talking to you." Silvio grabbed Vanessa's waist. "Get down, now." But Vanessa didn't drop. Her eyes were frantically searching the darkness of the mezzanine level, the balcony that overlooked the ballroom. Why use a loud, unstable ex-husband unless you wanted everyone looking down and to the left? She saw it. A tiny, almost invisible glint of light from the velvet curtains on the balcony. And then, a small red dot. It danced across the black lapel of Silvio's tuxedo, settling directly over his heart. Time seemed to stretch and warp. The sound of Brandon's screaming faded into a dull roar. The music had stopped. The only thing Vanessa could see was that red dot, the harbinger of death. Silvio was distracted, pushing her behind him, putting his body between her and Brandon, assuming the threat was the lunatic on the floor. He didn't see the laser. He was protecting her from the wrong direction. "Silvio!" she screamed. She didn't think about the dress. She didn't think about the diamonds. She didn't think about fear. She threw herself at him. She wasn't a small woman. She hit him with the full force of her weight, driving her shoulder into his chest. Silvio, caught off guard and unbalanced, toppled backward. They hit the marble floor hard, Vanessa landing on top of him. Crack. The sound wasn't like a gunshot in a movie. It was a sharp, percussive snap that sounded like a whip breaking the sound barrier. Something tore through the air where Silvio's chest had been a millisecond before. The bullet slammed into the heavy oak chair behind them, shattering the wood into splinters. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Screams tore through the air. People dropped to the floor, covering their heads. "Stay down!" Silvio roared. He flipped them over instantly, pinning Vanessa to the floor with his body. He covered her completely, shielding her head with his hand, his other hand reaching into his jacket for the gun he wasn't supposed to have but always carried. "Did they hit you?" he demanded, his face inches from hers. His eyes were wild, black holes of terror. "Vanessa, did they hit you?" "No," she gasped. The wind knocked out of her. "The balcony! It came from the balcony!" More shots rang out, but these were different. Rapid, controlled bursts. Rinaldi's security team was returning fire. Silvio didn't look up. He kept her pinned, his body a human barricade. He was murmuring a stream of curses in Italian, a prayer of violence. "Clear! The balcony is clear!" A voice shouted over the comms earpiece Silvio was wearing. "Secure the exits! No one leaves!" Silvio barked back. Slowly, the chaos subsided into the whimpering of terrified guests and the shouting of security teams. Silvio sat up, but he kept a hand on Vanessa's chest, keeping her down. He scanned her frantically. "Are you hurt?" "Tell me." "I'm okay," Vanessa said, trying to sit up. My arm stings." Silvio looked at her arm. The gold dress was ripped near the elbow. Blood was welling up, bright red against the metallic fabric, dripping onto the white marble floor. "You're shot," Silvio choked out, his face draining of all color. Vanessa looked at the wound. She saw a shard of crystal embedded in her skin. No, it's glass. From Brandon's tray. I landed on the glass. She reached to pull it out, but Silvio caught her hand. "Don't touch it. Do not touch it." He looked at the blood. Her blood. On the floor of his event. The transformation in him was terrifying. The concern vanished, replaced by a cold, demonic rage that made the temperature in the room seem to drop 10 degrees. He stood up, pulling Vanessa with him, but keeping her tucked into his side so tightly it hurt. He looked across the room. Brandon was on the ground, zip-tied again, pinned by 2 guards. He was sobbing, shouting that he didn't know about the gun, that they forced him, that he just wanted his debt cleared. Silvio didn't even look at him. He looked up at the balcony where his men were dragging a body away. The sniper. "Marco," Silvio said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Marco appeared, looking grim. "Boss, we got the shooter. Albanian contractor. He's dead. Brandon is in custody. We're locking down the hotel. Get the car," Silvio ordered. "Take Vanessa to the house. Get the doctor." "Silvio, I'm fine," Vanessa protested, though her arm was throbbing nastily. "It's just a cut." Silvio turned to her. He took her face in his hands. His fingers were trembling. "You pushed me," he whispered, as if he couldn't quite process the information. "You saw the laser. You pushed me. You were looking the wrong way," she said, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "You took a bullet for me. It missed. It missed because you moved me. If you had been a second slower." He closed his eyes, taking a shuddering breath. When he opened them, the humanity was gone. Go with Marco. I have work to do. What work? Vanessa asked, fear gripping her again. Silvio, don't do anything stupid. The police are coming. The police can have the mess, Silvio said. He looked at the blood on her arm again. The Albanians sent a clown to distract me and a coward to kill me. And they made you bleed. He kissed her forehead. It felt like a goodbye. Go home, Vanessa. Wait for me. Silvio. He turned away. He walked toward where Brandon was being held. The look on his face promised a violence so profound that even his own men stepped back as he approached. Marco gently took Vanessa's uninjured arm. Come, Signora. Ma'am, we must go. Now. Vanessa let herself be led away, her gold dress trailing through the debris of the ruined gala. She looked back one last time. Silvio was standing over Brandon, looking down at him with the detached curiosity of an executioner. He wasn't yelling. He was just standing there, radiating death. She realized then that the war wasn't coming. The war had just started, and she had fired the first shot by saving the king. As Marco ushered her out the side exit into the waiting armored SUV, Vanessa slumped against the leather seat. The pain in her arm was sharp, burning, but it was nothing compared to the cold dread settling in her stomach. She had saved him. She knew that. But looking at Silvio's face in those final moments, she wondered if she had saved the man she loved, or if she had just unleashed the monster he kept chained for her sake. The car sped off into the Chicago night. Vanessa touched the yellow diamonds around her neck. They felt heavy. They felt like a target, but as she looked at her blood staining the gold fabric of her dress, she tightened her jaw. Let them come. She thought fiercely. Let them try. She wasn't the baker anymore. She was the woman who had tackled a Mafia don to save his life. And if Silvio was going to burn the city down for her, she would be there to hand him the matches. The silence in the penthouse was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and smelled of antiseptic and iron. The expansive living room, usually a monument to minimalist luxury, had been transformed into a makeshift trauma unit. Vanessa sat on the edge of the leather sofa, her gold lame dress, the armor that was supposed to make her invincible, ruined. The sleeve had been sheared away by surgical scissors, leaving jagged edges of metallic fabric hanging around her shoulder. Her arm was numb, deadened by a local anesthetic, but she could feel the tug and pull of the needle as Dr. Vanchetti, a man with graying hair and hands as steady as a stone, stitched the laceration closed. 3 inches lower and it would have severed the radial artery, the doctor murmured, his voice low, strictly professional. He tied off a knot with a swift, practiced motion. As it is, Mrs. Rinaldi, excuse me, Miss Collins, is lucky. It's a flesh wound, deep, but it will heal. The scarring should be minimal if treated continuously with vitamin E. Silvio did not speak. He was standing by the panoramic window, his back to the room, looking out at the city that had tried to kill the woman sitting on his sofa. He had not moved for 20 minutes. He had stripped off his tuxedo jacket, and his white dress shirt was rolled up to the elbows, the fabric stained with smears of Vanessa's blood. It was a stark, horrifying contrast to the pristine nature of the room. Done, Dr. Vanchetti announced, applying a sterile gauze pad and taping it down. He began to pack his instruments into a black leather bag. She needs rest, fluids, and no heavy lifting for 2 weeks. I'll leave a prescription for painkillers, but I suspect she's in shock. Monitor her breathing tonight. Leave us, Silvio said. He didn't turn around. The command was flat, devoid of politeness. Of course, Mr. Rinaldi. Call if there is bleeding. The doctor nodded to Vanessa, a look of pity in his eyes, and hastily retreated toward the elevator, escorted by Marco. When the elevator door slid shut, the silence returned, louder than before. Vanessa touched the bandage on her arm. The numbness was starting to fade, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She looked at Silvio's back. The muscles in his shoulders were coiled so tight they looked painful, straining against the fine cotton of his shirt. Silvio, she whispered. He flinched. Visibly flinched, as if her voice were another bullet. He turned around slowly, His face was a mask of cold, devastating fury, but Vanessa knew him well enough now to see the cracks. His eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were hollow. He looked at her arm, then at the ruined dress, and finally at her face. He looked like a man surveying the wreckage of his own soul. "You are leaving," he stated. Vanessa blinked, confused by the sudden pivot. "What?" "The contract is void," Silvio said, walking toward the kitchen island where a decanter of whiskey sat. He poured a glass but didn't drink it. He just gripped the crystal tumbler until his knuckles turned white. "I have transferred the full agreed amount plus a severance bonus to your offshore account. The bakery is paid for. The deed is in your name. You have enough money to move to Europe, buy a villa in Tuscany, and never work another day in your life." "Silvio, stop," Vanessa said, trying to stand up. A wave of dizziness hit her, and she swayed. "Sit down," he roared, the sudden volume making her jump. He composed himself instantly, but his voice shook. "Sit down, Vanessa. Do not move." "I'm not going to Europe," she said, her voice trembling but stubborn. She sank back onto the sofa. "We have a deal. 1 year. The deal was protection." Silvio slammed the glass down on the counter. Ideally, it would have shattered, but the heavy crystal just made a dull, thudding sound that echoed like a gavel. "The deal was that I fix your life, and you fix my image. I did not hire you to bleed on my floor. I did not hire you to take a bullet meant for me. It wasn't a bullet," she argued weakly. "It was glass. It was an assassination attempt." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping in front of her, towering over her. He looked terrified. "You pushed me. You saw the laser and you pushed me. Do you have any idea how stupid that was? You are a civilian. You are a baker. You run when bullets fly. You do not throw yourself in front of a man who deserves to die 1,000 times over." "I didn't think," Vanessa admitted, looking up at him. Tears pricked her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming intensity of his fear. "I just saw the dot. I knew I couldn't let them hurt you." "Why?" he demanded, dropping to his knees in front of her. He didn't touch her. He kept his hands hovering, as if afraid he would break her further. "Why would you do that? For a bakery? For money?" "No," Vanessa whispered. She reached out with her good hand and touched his face. His skin was cold, his jaw rough with evening stubble. "You know why, Silvio? I told you at the gala. I didn't do it for the contract. I did it because I choose you. I choose the monster." Silvio closed his eyes, leaning his face into her palm. He let out a shuddering breath that sounded like a sob trapped in his chest. "You are a fool, a beautiful, reckless fool. I cannot protect you, Vanessa. I thought I could. I built this fortress. I hired the army, and still, they touched you. My arrogance almost got you killed. But I'm alive," she said firmly. "And you're alive. That's what matters. We're still here." He opened his eyes. The brown irises were almost black, swirling with a darkness she had never seen before. It wasn't fear anymore. It was resolution. "Yes," he said softly. "We are here, but they are still out there." He stood up, pulling away from her touch. The moment of vulnerability vanished, replaced by the icy armor of the boss. He walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a fresh black coat. He checked the magazine of his pistol, the metallic click-clack of the slide sounding obscene in the quiet room. "Where are you going?" Vanessa asked, panic rising in her chest. She pushed herself up, ignoring the dizziness. "Silvio, the police are all over the city. You can't go out there." "The police are busy processing the crime scene at the hotel," Silvio said calmly. He holstered the weapon. "And Brandon is in a holding cell at the precinct. But the Albanians are waiting to see if they succeeded." "Silvio, please," she begged, moving toward him. Her legs felt heavy. "Don't go. Stay here. Let the police handle it." "The police collect evidence, Vanessa. I collect debts." He stopped at the door and turned to her. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of love and lethal intent. "Marco is outside the door. He has orders to let no one in, not even God himself. You will take the pills the doctor left. You will sleep, and when you wake up, the world will be clean. Silvio, she cried out as he opened the door. He paused. I love you, Vanessa. That is why I have to finish this. The door clicked shut. The lock engaged with a heavy thud. Vanessa was alone in the glass cage, the scent of her own blood still lingering in the air. The warehouse district on the south side of Chicago was a graveyard of industry. Rusted skeletons of old factories loomed against the night sky, their broken windows like hollow eyes staring out at the river. The wind howled through the alleyways, carrying the smell of rot and gasoline. Inside Warehouse 4B, the atmosphere was frozen. A single industrial light hung from the ceiling, casting a harsh, yellow cone of light onto the concrete floor. In the center of the light, kneeling on the damp ground, was Brandon. He was still wearing the waiter's uniform from the gala, though it was now torn and stained with sweat and grime. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. His face was swollen, a map of bruises from where security had subdued him. He was weeping, a low, pathetic sound that echoed off the metal walls. Standing in the shadows were 3 men. They were not Italians. They were tall, broad, with harsh features and cold eyes. The Albanians. Their leader, a man named Luca, stood with his arms crossed, smoking a cigarette. He looked impatient. Where is he? Luca growled, checking his watch. He said midnight. It is midnight. Maybe he is dead, one of his men sneered. Maybe the shot didn't miss. The shot missed. A voice echoed from the darkness of the main bay door. The Albanians spun around, hands going to their jackets. Silvio Rinaldi stepped into the light. He was alone. He walked with a casual, terrifying confidence, his hands open at his sides. He didn't look like a man who had almost been assassinated 3 hours ago. He looked like a man who had come to inspect a property. Rinaldi, Luca said, relaxing slightly but keeping his hand near his holster. You have balls coming here alone. We heard you had a bad night. A messy night, Silvio corrected. He stopped 10 feet away from them, ignoring Brandon entirely. You broke the rules, Luca. We had a truce. Territory lines were drawn. Business changes. Luca shrugged, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under his boot. You were getting too strong. The construction contracts. The unions. You were squeezing us out. And then you marry the baker? We thought you had gone soft. Distracted. Distracted. Silvio repeated the word, tasting it. He looked at Brandon, who was looking up at him with desperate hope. Mr. Rinaldi, Brandon choked out. Tell them I did what they asked. I made the scene. I screamed. You promised. They promised if I did it, my debt was cleared. Silvio looked down at the man who had tormented Vanessa for years. The man who had called her fat, who had stolen her money, who had tried to rob her sanctuary. You see, Silvio said to Luca, his voice conversational. This is where I am confused. This man, he owes you money, correct? 12,000, Luca said, plus interest. And he offered to pay his debt by creating a distraction at my gala so your sniper could take a shot at me. He was eager to please, Luca smirked. He hates you. He said you stole his wife. He threw away his wife, Silvio corrected. I found her. Silvio took a step closer to Brandon. Brandon flinched, expecting a kick. I pulled some strings at the precinct, Silvio said to Brandon. I made sure the charges stuck. Every report, every signature, every photograph. Then my lawyers arranged your release just long enough for tonight. I needed you walking into my ballroom in a uniform, thinking you were clever. I brought you here. Thank you. Brandon sobbed, relief washing over his face. Oh, God, thank you. I knew you were reasonable. I'll leave town. I swear I'll never see her again. I know you won't, Silvio said. He turned back to Luca. Here's the deal. I am a businessman. I believe in paying debts. This man owes you money. He is yours. Take him. Do what you want with him. Consider his debt transferred. Brandon's eyes went wide. What? No, you can't. Luca laughed, a harsh barking sound. You brought him to us? As a gift? As a payment, Silvio said. For the bullet. You are a cold bastard, Rinaldi. Luca grinned, motioning for his men to grab Brandon. I like that. Maybe we can renegotiate the territory after all. You give us the docks. We forget this happened. 2 Albanians grabbed Brandon by the arms. He screamed, thrashing against them. Silvio, please. She loves me. Vanessa loves me. She won't forgive you. Silvio didn't blink. She despises you. You are a ghost, Brandon. As the men dragged Brandon toward the back exit, Luca stepped forward, extending a hand. So, we are good? No more war? Silvio looked at the extended hand. Then he looked at Luca's eyes. You misunderstand, Silvio said softly. What? I gave you Brandon because he is trash, and trash belongs in the dump, Silvio said. He unbuttoned his coat. But you fired a weapon into a room where my wife was standing. You made her bleed. Luca's smile faltered. He saw the shift in Silvio's eyes, the total absence of humanity. He reached for his gun. He was too slow. Silvio drew his weapon with a speed that blurred in the yellow light. Bang, bang. 2 shots. Center mass. Luca crumpled backward, a look of shock frozen on his face. The 2 men holding Brandon dropped him and reached for their weapons. Silvio didn't seek cover. He walked forward, firing with rhythmic precision. Bang! The man on the left fell. Bang! The man on the right spun around, clutching his shoulder, and Silvio finished him with a second shot to the head. Silence returned to the warehouse, broken only by Brandon's hyperventilating sobs. Silvio stood over the bodies. He checked them, kicking the guns away. Then he turned to Brandon, who was curled in a fetal position on the floor, surrounded by corpses. Please, Brandon whispered. Please don't kill me. Silvio holstered his gun. He adjusted his cuffs. I told you, Silvio said, his voice echoing in the vast space. I am not going to kill you. I gave you to them. They are dead now, but your debt remains. He walked toward the exit. Wait, Brandon screamed. You can't leave me here. The police. The bodies. They'll think I did it. I'm the only one alive. Silvio paused at the door. He didn't look back. Exactly, Silvio said. The police will find a drug deal gone wrong. 3 dead Albanian mobsters. And 1 man holding the bag, with his fingerprints all over the scene and a motive a mile wide. You won't go to jail for robbery, Brandon. You're going to prison for triple homicide. You'll never see daylight again. Silvio! Brandon screamed, his voice cracking into madness. Silvio! Silvio walked out into the cold Chicago night. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Detective, Silvio said calmly. I have an anonymous tip about a shooting at the old shipyard warehouse. Yes, it sounds like a gang dispute. You might want to hurry. He hung up. He tossed the burner phone into the river. He looked at his hands. There was no blood on them, but he could feel the weight of the souls he had just dispatched. He didn't care about the Albanians. He didn't care about Brandon. He only cared about the drop of blood on the gold dress. He got into his car. Home, he told the driver. The sun was rising over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. The light filtered through the sheer curtains of the guest bedroom. No, her bedroom. Vanessa woke up slowly. The first thing she felt was the throbbing in her arm. The second was a wave of nausea so potent it made the room spin. She bolted upright, ignoring the pain in her arm, and scrambled to the ensuite bathroom. She barely made it to the toilet before her stomach emptied itself. She knelt there on the cold tiles, shivering, heaving until there was nothing left. She flushed the toilet and slumped back against the wall, wiping her mouth with a trembling hand. Flu, she whispered to herself. It's just the flu, or shock, but deep down, in a quiet, instinctual part of her brain, she knew it wasn't the flu. She counted the days in her head. She was late, 2 weeks late. With everything happening, the contract, the fire, the gala, she hadn't even noticed. Vanessa, Silvio's voice came from the bedroom. It was rough, tired. In here, she croaked. Silvio appeared in the doorway. He had showered. His hair was damp, and he was wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt. He looked human, vulnerable. He saw her on the floor and was at her side in an instant. Are you sick? Is it the wound? Is it an infection? He reached for her forehead, his hand cool against her skin. I'm okay, she said, leaning into his touch. Just my stomach. Nerves, I think. Silvio helped her stand up. He led her back to the bed, tucking her in against the pillows. He sat on the edge of the mattress, taking her hand. The one with the ring. Is it done? Vanessa asked, searching his face. Silvio nodded. It is done. The Albanians will not bother us again. Their organization has been dismantled. And Brandon? She asked. It was a whisper. Brandon is with the police, Silvio said. He didn't smile, but there was a grim satisfaction in his eyes. He was found at the scene of a very violent crime. He will be spending the rest of his life in maximum security. He can never hurt you again. Vanessa let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for years. The boogeyman was gone. And you? She asked. Are you okay? Silvio looked down at their joined hands. I am a man who kills, Vanessa. I made peace with that a long time ago. But last night I killed because they hurt you. And that felt different. It felt righteous. He looked up at her, his dark eyes vulnerable. Can you live with that? Can you live with a man who has blood on his hands, as long as it is not yours? Vanessa looked at him. She saw the exhaustion, the fear of rejection, the desperate love he was trying to hide. She thought about the nausea in her stomach. She thought about the baby that might be growing inside her, a child made of light and shadow. She reached out and traced the line of his jaw. I told you, Silvio, she said softly. I choose you, all of you, the suit and the gun, the gala and the warehouse. I'm not going anywhere. Silvio leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, chaste, a promise of peace after the war. Then sleep, he whispered. We have a life to build. And I have a feeling it is going to be a long one. Vanessa closed her eyes, the morning sickness fading into a dull background noise. She was safe. She was loved. And for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. 8 months had passed since the night the warehouse floor was stained with retribution, but the Chicago skyline remained the same, a jagged range of steel and glass piercing the autumn sky. What had changed, however, was everything else. Sweet Haven had reopened, scarred but standing, with a temporary kitchen built inside a leased storefront while a new warehouse rose from ash. Vanessa's grandmother had cried when Vanessa placed the first warm loaf into her hands again, proof that their legacy hadn't been burned out of the world. Jerry still drove the deliveries on Tuesdays, stubbornly refusing to quit. Silvio had quietly paid his lost wages and made sure Jerry's children would never go without. Vanessa stood in the center of the bridal suite at the Rinaldi estate, a sprawling mansion on the shores of Lake Michigan that made Silvio's penthouse look like a bachelor pad. She stared at her reflection in the gilded trifold mirror, one hand resting protectively on the swell of her stomach. At 8.5 months pregnant, she felt less like a bride and more like a planet in orbit. But the woman staring back at her was unrecognizable from the terrified baker who had worn a burgundy dress to a blind date nearly a year ago. This woman was substantial. She was radiant. She was formidable. Hold still, Ness, or I'm going to stick you with this pin, Jessica warned, kneeling on the floor surrounded by layers of ivory silk. I can't help it. Vanessa laughed, a rich, throaty sound. He's kicking again. I think he knows today is a big day. He wants to walk down the aisle himself. He can wait, Jessica muttered around a mouthful of pins. She stood up, smoothing the skirt of the custom gown. There, perfect. Look at you. Vanessa looked. The dress was a masterpiece of engineering and art, designed specifically to accommodate her heavily pregnant form without hiding it. It wasn't a tent. It was a celebration. The bodice was encrusted with thousands of tiny pearls that transitioned into a flowing silk skirt that draped over her bump like water over a stone. The neckline was deep, framing the yellow diamond necklace, the collar, as Silvio called it, that she hadn't taken off since the gala. It fits, Vanessa whispered. Of course it fits, Jessica said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. It was made for you. Just like this life. Jessica walked over to the side table and poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. She handed one to Vanessa. To the CEO of Sweet Haven Enterprises. Vanessa took the glass, shaking her head. I still can't believe we opened the third location last week. The numbers from the franchise in the Loop are insane, Jess. You're a genius manager. I just organized what you built, Jessica corrected, her eyes shining with genuine pride. You created the recipes. You created the soul of the place. I just make sure the trucks run on time, and the money gets counted. Speaking of trucks, did you see the new delivery fleet? The logo looks amazing. I saw them. Vanessa smiled. Silvio insisted on armoring them, didn't he? The suspension looks heavy. He says it's for potholes. Jessica smirked. But we both know those croissant vans could survive a tactical strike. He doesn't take chances with you or your business anymore. No, Vanessa agreed softly, rubbing her thumb over the condensation on the glass. He doesn't. The door to the suite opened without a knock. Jessica spun around, ready to scold whoever was interrupting. But the words died in her throat. Silvio Rinaldi stood in the doorway. He was breathtaking. He wore a tuxedo of midnight blue, so dark it appeared black, with a velvet lapel that caught the light. His hair was trimmed sharp, his jaw freshly shaven, and he carried himself with the regal, predatory grace of a king entering his court. But it was his eyes, those dark, intense eyes, that sucked the air out of the room. They locked onto Vanessa and didn't let go. You can't be here, Jessica shrieked, waving her hands. It's bad luck. You're not supposed to see the bride before the altar. Silvio didn't even glance at her. He walked into the room, his gaze fixed on Vanessa, as if she were the only source of gravity in the universe. I make my own luck, Silvio said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Vanessa's chest. And I needed to see her. Jessica looked between them, saw the electricity arcing across the room, and sighed. Fine. I'll give you 2 minutes. But if the cake collapses, I'm blaming you, Rinaldi. She grabbed the bottle of cider and slipped out the door, closing it softly. Silvio stopped a foot away from Vanessa. He didn't touch her immediately. He just looked. He scanned her from the pearl-encrusted bodice to the swell of her belly, down to the hem of the silk skirt, and back up to her face. His expression wasn't just love. It was reverence. It was the look of a man witnessing a miracle. Vanessa, he breathed. Hi, she whispered, suddenly shy under the intensity of his inspection. Do I look okay? I feel huge. You look... Silvio struggled for the word, shaking his head. He closed the distance and fell to his knees. Vanessa gasped as the most feared man in Chicago, the boss who controlled the docks and the unions, knelt on the floor in his custom tuxedo, disregarding the pristine fabric. He placed his large, warm hands on either side of her stomach. You look like life, he said, pressing his forehead against her bump. You look like everything I ever wanted and never thought I deserved. The baby kicked hard against his cheek. Silvio laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that he reserved only for this room, only for them. He is strong, Silvio murmured, kissing the silk covering her belly. He is ready to fight the world. He better be ready to sleep through the night first, Vanessa teased, threading her fingers through Silvio's dark hair. Silvio, stand up. You're going to ruin your knees. He stood, towering over her again, and cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed over her cheekbones. Are you happy? He asked, his eyes searching hers for any trace of the fear that used to live there. Is this what you want? There is still a car waiting out back. You can run. You can take the money in the bakery and leave the danger behind. Vanessa covered his hands with hers. Silvio, look at me. He held her gaze. I have a business that I built. I have a best friend who runs it. I have a son kicking my bladder. And I have you. Why would I run from the only place I've ever felt safe? Because I am a dangerous man, he reminded her. Because my world has sharp edges. And I have armor, she said, nodding to the dress, then to the ring, and finally to her heart. We're partners, Silvio. You handle the shadows. I handle the light. And we meet in the middle. Silvio leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't hungry or desperate like their first time. It was deep, steady, a promise sealed in breath and bone. It was a vow spoken without words. 2 minutes are up, Jessica yelled through the door. Silvio pulled back, resting his forehead against hers for one last second. I will see you at the altar, Tesoro. My treasure. Try not to run. I can't run, she laughed, patting her stomach. I can barely waddle. Silvio smirked, that arrogant, charming tilt of his lips returning. Then waddle to me. I will be waiting. The ceremony was held in the estate's sunken garden, a marvel of landscape architecture surrounded by high stone walls covered in ivy. It was beautiful, filled with white roses and golden ribbons. But Vanessa, with her honed instincts, noticed the other details too. She noticed that the gardeners standing by the perimeter were wearing earpieces. She noticed the slight bulge of shoulder holsters under the tuxedos of the ushers. She noticed that the drone flying overhead wasn't just for photography. It was surveillance. 8 months ago, this would have terrified her. Now, it was just background noise. It was the hum of the machine that kept her safe. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning leaves in Lake Michigan. The string quartet began to play a slow, haunting version of Can't Help Falling in Love. The guests stood. There were hundreds of them. Politicians, business tycoons, associates from the family, and the entire staff of Sweet Haven Bakery, who had been given the day off and flown in on a private charter. Vanessa walked down the aisle alone. Her parents were gone, and she had refused to let anyone else give her away. She belonged to herself until she chose to give herself to him. Silvio stood at the altar, flanked by Marco. He watched her approach with an intensity that made the rest of the world fade into gray. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at the priest. He looked only at her. She was halfway down the aisle when the sound tore through the serenity of the garden. The high-pitched wail of tires locking against asphalt echoed from the main driveway just beyond the garden wall. It was followed by the roar of an engine revving aggressively. The reaction was instantaneous. Silvio didn't flinch, but his hand moved inside his jacket. Marco stepped forward, shielding Silvio. The gardeners dropped their rakes and drew automatic weapons from beneath the flower bushes. The guests gasped, a ripple of panic moving through the crowd. Vanessa stopped. Her hand went to her stomach instinctively. The memory of the warehouse, of the laser dot, of the glass shattering, flooded back. Not today, she thought furiously. Please, not today. Silvio's eyes left hers for a split second, snapping to the perimeter wall. He raised a hand, signaling his men to hold fire, his face a mask of calculated violence. The engine roared again, closer. Then, a car door slammed. "Wait!" a voice shouted from the other side of the gate. "Don't shoot! I'm the best man! I have the rings!" The tension in the garden snapped like a rubber band, but not into violence, into confusion. Marco tapped his earpiece, listening to a report from the gate guards. His shoulders relaxed. He looked at Silvio and gave a sheepish nod. "It's Dante," Marco whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. "His car broke down on the highway. He borrowed a delivery scooter to get the rings here, then hitched a ride with the caterer's late van. He told the driver to floor it." Silvio let out a breath, his hand coming out of his jacket empty. He looked at Vanessa. She stood frozen in the middle of the aisle. Then, she started to laugh. It started as a giggle and bubbled up into a full, belly-shaking laugh that relieved the pressure in the air. "It's okay," Vanessa called out to the terrified guests. "It's just the rings. Nobody is dying today." The gate burst open, and Dante, Silvio's youngest cousin, ran in, disheveled, holding a velvet pillow. I'm here. Don't kill me, boss." Silvio shook his head, a wry smile touching his lips. He stepped down from the altar, ignoring protocol again, and walked to where Vanessa stood. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking her hands. "I'm fine," she said, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. "Just never a dull moment with you, is there?" "Never," he promised. "Shall we finish this before anyone else decides to crash the gates? Please." They walked the rest of the way together. The vows were short. They didn't need flowery poetry. They had already proven their devotion in blood and ink. "I, Silvio, take you, Vanessa, to be my wife, to protect you when the world burns, to honor you when the silence falls, To love you until my last breath leaves my body. I, Vanessa, take you, Silvio, to be my husband, to stand with you in the shadows, to be your anchor in the storm, to love you and the family we are building forever. When Silvio slid the simple gold band onto her finger, next to the massive diamond, Vanessa felt a sense of completion so profound it made her lightheaded. By the power vested in me, the priest said, looking slightly relieved that no shootout had occurred, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Silvio didn't wait. He pulled her close, mindful of the baby, and kissed her with a passion that made the guests cheer. It was a kiss of victory. They had won. The ex was gone. The rivals were dead. The empire was secure. The reception was a blur of golden light, jazz music, and enough food to feed an army. The ballroom of the estate was decorated with thousands of candles, casting a warm glow over the revelry. Vanessa sat at the head table, her feet throbbing but her heart full. She watched Jessica dancing with Marco, laughing as the stoic bodyguard tried to keep up with her energy. She watched her bakery staff eating lobster and drinking champagne, treated like royalty. You look tired, Silvio murmured, leaning close to her. His hand rested on the back of her chair, his fingers idly playing with the stray curls at the nape of her neck. Happy tired, she corrected. My feet are plotting a mutiny, though. We can leave, he offered immediately. I can clear the room in 5 minutes. And miss the cake? Vanessa pointed to the massive 5-tier confection in the center of the room, a creation from her own bakery, designed by her top pastry chef. Absolutely not. I need to see if the buttercream held up. Always the baker, Silvio chuckled, kissing her temple. Come, dance with me. 1 song, then we cut the cake. He helped her up. She felt heavy, her center of gravity shifted, but Silvio held her as if she were weightless. They moved to the dance floor. The band slowed the tempo, playing a soft, instrumental jazz ballad. Silvio pulled her close, leaving space for the baby between them. They swayed gently. You did it, Vanessa whispered against his lapel. You gave me the fairy tale. A slightly twisted, dark Mafia fairy tale, but a fairy tale nonetheless. You wrote the story, Vanessa, he said seriously. I just provided the setting. You are the one who turned a contract into a life. I love you, Silvio. I worship you, Vanessa. She closed her eyes, resting her head on his shoulder, letting the music wash over her. She felt the baby shift again, a low, deep pressure. Then she felt something else. A sharp, distinct pop low in her abdomen, followed immediately by a gush of warmth. Vanessa stopped moving. Her eyes snapped open. Silvio, she said, her voice strangled. He stopped instantly. What is it? Are you in pain? The cake, she said, looking down at the puddle of clear fluid rapidly expanding on the marble floor beneath her gold dress. We're going to have to skip the cake. Silvio followed her gaze. He stared at the water. For a second, the ruthless Mafia boss looked completely, utterly panicked. Is that my water? Vanessa confirmed, gripping his lapel tighter as a contraction hit her. Not a practice one, but a real, tightening cramp that stole her breath. It's time. The transformation in Silvio was instantaneous. The panic vanished, replaced by tactical command mode. Marco! He roared over the music. The music cut out. The room went silent. Get the car. Call the hospital. Tell Dr. Vanzetti to prep the delivery suite. Silvio barked orders as he scooped Vanessa up into his arms. Silvio, I can walk, she protested, though another contraction made her wince. You are in labor. You do not walk, he stated, striding toward the exit. Out of my way! Move! The guests parted like the Red Sea. Jessica came running up, her face pale. Is it the baby? It's the baby! Vanessa called out over Silvio's shoulder, actually laughing despite the pain. Jess! Save me a slice of cake! Go! Go! Jessica shouted, clapping her hands. Silvio carried her out of the ballroom, down the grand steps, and into the waiting limousine that Marco had already pulled up. He settled her in the back seat, shouting at the driver to drive. As the car sped away, leaving the party behind, Vanessa gripped Silvio's hand. The pain was intensifying, coming in waves. Breathe, Silvio coached, looking more stressed than he had during the shootout. In and out, just like the class. You hated the class, she panted. I hated the pillows, he corrected, wiping sweat from her forehead with his silk handkerchief. The breathing was logical. You are doing great, Tesoro. My treasure. We will be there in 10 minutes. Silvio, she gasped as the contraction peaked. If I break your hand, I'm sorry. Break it, he offered, offering his other hand too. Break whatever you need. Just bring our son to me. The labor was long. It was messy. It was agonizing. It was nothing like the movies. For 6 hours, Vanessa fought. She sweated, she cursed, she cried. And through every second of it, Silvio was there. He didn't leave the room. He didn't look away. He held her hand. He fed her ice chips. He let her scream into his shoulder. He was her anchor in the storm of biology that was taking over her body. When the final moment came, when the doctor said it was time to push, Silvio was right beside her head, whispering encouragement in Italian, his voice thick with emotion. You are a warrior, he told her. You are the strongest thing on this earth. One more, Vanessa. Just one more. With a final guttural cry that ripped from her throat, Vanessa gave everything she had left. And then, the sound changed. A thin, high-pitched wail filled the room. Vanessa collapsed back onto the pillows, sobbing with exhaustion. Is he okay? He is perfect, the doctor announced. Silvio watched as the nurses cleaned the infant. Tears were streaming down his face, unashamedly. He looked at the bloody, squalling bundle as if it were the Holy Grail. The nurse wrapped the baby in a blanket and handed him to Vanessa. She looked down. He was tiny, red-faced, and furious at the world. He had a tuft of black hair, and when he blinked his eyes open for a second, she saw they were dark. Dark like obsidian. Dark like his father's. Hi, she whispered, touching his tiny fist. Hi, little one. Silvio leaned over the bed, his presence encompassing them both. He reached out a trembling finger and stroked the baby's cheek. The baby turned his head toward the touch. A son, Silvio whispered, his voice cracking. Alessandro. We will call him Alessandro. Alessandro Rinaldi. Vanessa tested the name. It sounded strong. It sounded like a legacy. I like it. Silvio kissed her, tasting of salt and joy. Thank you. Thank you for this life. Thank you for him. 3 days later, Vanessa stood on the balcony of the penthouse, the same balcony where she had once stood in a silk robe, terrified of the future. The city of Chicago lay spread out below them, a grid of lights twinkling in the twilight. She held Alessandro in her arms. He was sleeping, wrapped in a blanket knitted by Jessica. Silvio came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, careful of her healing body. He rested his chin on her shoulder, looking down at his son. He is sleeping? Silvio asked softly. For now. Vanessa smiled. He has your temper, though. When he's hungry, the whole building knows it. Good, Silvio said. He will need a loud voice to lead this family one day. Vanessa leaned back into him. You know, a year ago, I was serving pasta and dodging a man who called me worthless. I was counting pennies to pay rent. I thought my life was over. And now, Vanessa looked at the reflection in the glass door. She saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out forged in gold. She saw a mother holding the future in her arms. She saw a wife held by a man who would tear down the sky to keep her dry. Brandon was gone, rotting in a cell, a forgotten memory. The Albanians were a ghost story told to frighten new criminals. Sweet Haven was an empire of sugar and flour. Now, Vanessa said, turning her head to kiss her husband. Now, I think the contract was the best deal I ever made. Silvio smiled, the dangerous, possessive smile of the Mafia boss, softened by the love of a father. It was not a contract, Vanessa, he whispered, tightening his hold on his world. It was destiny. Below them, the city moved on, unaware of the kings and queens watching from above. But in the penthouse, surrounded by glass and steel and love, the Rinaldi family had finally, truly, come home.